Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Mission AstroAccess webinar. My name is Anna Volker, and I'll be your host for today. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a white person with short brown hair wearing a light green shirt. I am so excited to have everyone joining today. And while folks are still filtering into the room, I'm just going to go over a couple quick accessibility notes. So today we are joined by a live CART captioner, and you can enable those captions by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We also have an ASL interpreter that I have spotlighted for everyone so that he is visible to all viewers. So we have both of those services in place. In terms of asking questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar as opposed to the chat so that we can keep all your questions organized and make sure we get to as many of you as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get things started. As you know, Mission AstroAccess is an exciting new project dedicated to the idea of promoting disability inclusion and diversity in space exploration. We're joined by a large number of amazing nonprofit partners who are supporting this cause, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we go through today's call. But really, the main purpose of this discussion is for anyone out there who's interested in applying. We want to be here, meet you, and answer any questions you might have about the application process. As you may already know, the application is open now live and closes on August 15th. Our parabolic flight, flying with 0G from Long Beach, California, will take place on October 17th. So we're really excited to get things rolling this year and to start with this really exciting project. Long term, we really hope to go further and to keep pushing the boundaries of what we can do and what we can show the world. So we're really excited to have you all joining for our first ever Mission AstroAccess webinar. To get things started, I'd like to turn over the discussion to Dr. Sherry Wells Jensen from Bowling Green State University. Welcome, Sherry.
Hi there, everybody. I'm just muting voiceover so that I don't have to listen to that chatter in my headphones while I'm talking to you all. I'm so excited to be part of this. It's an honor and a delight to be on this team. It is a group of marvelous people with audacious goals, and that is the best combination that you could ever ask for. So here's where we're going with this. If you want to change the world, really change the world, you need two things. You need outrageous amounts of energy and enthusiasm and joyful adventurousness, and you need a plan. You need always to be asking, how is this thing to be done? And we're here today to look at the plan. Now, we're not asking, can disabled people withstand a 0G flight? If I wanted to know that, if I wanted to know, can disabled people stand to be jounced around and take some changes in gravity, I would put you all in a bus and take you to Sandusky, Ohio, just down the road from me. And I would take you to Cedar Point, which is a big amusement park, put you all on the Top Thrill dragster, and which is a really ridiculously big roller coaster. And bam, that would answer my question. Mission accomplished, we'd be done. But that's not what we're about here. We're asking a deeper question. So, and the question is this: beyond ableism, beyond the attitude that some people have that disabled people should just stay put and keep out of the way, what is it that keeps disabled people from jobs, especially jobs in STEM, and from full and equal participation in society? Now, we decided to start answering this question by looking at space. What is it that's preventing disabled people from traveling into space? And not just because space is our passion, even though it is, but because space is really new. It's a brand new thing in the history of humanity. So far, only about 550 people have gone to space. That number is sort of going up by 4s and 6s every week, sort of, just now. But still, we are just beginning to establish precedents and procedures for everyone, not just for disabled people, but for everyone, and how we're going to do things in space. And we want to be there before the rules get settled down. We want to start our influence before the rules get too established. Space is a new place, and we are here to help make space a new and accessible place. So we need to show how that can be done, not just that we want to do it, not just that it'd be nice if we could, but how exactly this can be done. So let me give you an Earth example, and this will be familiar to many of you. I'm confident it will ring familiar to many of you. So say that I'm in New York City I, as a fully blind person who travels with a white cane, and my able-bodied friend, were going to a concert. And so she, for some reason, I don't know, leaves a half hour before me. So she's going down the street in New York City. This is kind of how it rolls for her. So it's kind of in the evening. She's going down this city street. She's having an okay time. There's a brightly colored fire hydrant. She sort of walks around that. She's looking, glancing at her path ahead of her, sort of to look where the open spaces are, avoiding people. She might every once in a while look to her left to see that there's cars on the road. She's probably given this about 30% of her attention. So she watches for the traffic light up ahead. She looks around. The cars are quite visible to her, especially because it's evening. They've got headlights. When the signal light changes, she steps into the painted sidewalk. She crosses the street. This whole business, the street crossing part, maybe 60% of her attention. I don't know, maybe something like that. So a little bit later, I'm coming down the same street. The first thing that's different is I'm walking with a white cane in my hand. I touch the fire hydrant with the end of my cane and I walk around it. I'm listening for where the people are. I'm very aware of the building line that I can hear on my right-hand side, parallel to the sidewalk. I'm very aware of the traffic on my left-hand side, the parallel traffic that's going in the street. I'm walking around people. I'm touching some obstacles, listening for others. Probably 60% of my attention is absorbed in this task. I can still do other things, but I'm kind of present for this. So I'm listening for where the corner is. I hear when the end of the building row stops on my right. I hear parallel traffic on my left slowing down, making a stop. I notice the traffic passing obviously in front of me. I might feel the curb cut with my foot as I approach the street corner. So I'm standing there waiting to cross the street. If I'm concerned about this for any reason, or if I know from the research that I've done in advance, which my sighted companion may or may not have done, I don't know. But from the research that I have done in advance, if I know that the street corner isn't quite square, if the streets are coming together at a weird angle, there's anything funny about it, I might try to find the side of the sidewalk with the side of my foot and kind of get a straight line so I can get a straight bearing across that open intersection. I know when to cross the street because the cars beside me have begun to go again and the traffic in front of me is stopped. So this process, I step into the street, I walk across the street. I'm guessing 90% of my attention is occupied with this process. Now my companion and I both arrive safely on the other side of the street. My companion has benefited from the way the environment is constructed. The fire hydrants are painted a nice bright color for her benefit. And this is a good thing. The traffic lights are visible to her. Again, it's a good thing. The headlights on the cars are making the cars very visible. The crosswalk is painted. All these accommodations for the needs of the sighted traveler are a good thing. And we both cross the street safely. We both get to the concert, but our procedures for doing these things have been different. And we spent a lot of time in the disabled community thinking about what these procedures should be like. What is it that I need to do differently as a fully blind person to walk safely and contentedly and confidently down that city street? And we think about this process as being for the benefit of disabled pedestrians. But if you think about it for a minute longer, the kinds of accommodations that we might put in place for the benefit of the blind pedestrian or for the pedestrian in a wheelchair or the deaf pedestrian make the whole sidewalk safer and the street crossing safer for everybody. If, for example, there's an audible traffic signal that reinforces for me the movements of the cars. I can hear the movements of the cars, but I can also hear the traffic signal go beep when it's time to go. That's good. Doesn't hurt anybody. It makes everything safer. It's also good for my excited companion who is, after all, only paying 60% of her attention as she crosses the street. And the curb cut that my friends in wheelchairs use to go down the curb, that I also use to detect the presence of the street coming up, is also nice for the sighted, able-bodied pedestrian who's walking along. So these accommodations that are nominally there for the benefit of the disabled people turn out to be useful for everyone and make the whole travel situation safer and more convenient. So here's how that situation applies for us. Here's our goal. We want to use this zero gravity flight to work out procedures for future disabled astronauts, for scientists who may need in the pursuit of their science to be payload specialists and travel into space, for just ordinary people who might want to travel into space for fun, and to make at the same time everything safer and more convenient for everyone by implementing our these minor changes, these accommodations. So things that we might think about, staying oriented, for example. How is a blind person going to stay oriented in zero-G? Am I going to get lost? Well, fair question. Everybody gets lost, and I have been lost lots in my life. I've been lost in the woods. We've all been lost in the city. I've been lost in suburbia. I've been lost in a big hotel. I've been lost in a kayak in the middle of a lake. One very exciting afternoon, I was lost on the shores of the Irish Sea with my backpack when the tide was coming in. That was fun. But here's the thing. I have never been lost on a bus, because on a bus, I always know where front is because I can reach out and touch any seat. And I can know obviously where the front is. And certainly if I'm sitting down, I know where front is. And I always know where down is. Thank you, gravity. With those two pieces of information, I can always find the exit wherever I'm at on the bus. I know where that front door is. I know where the back door is. And I know where the sides of the bus are in case I need a window. So again, we're not asking, how are these things possible? How is it possible for a blind person to stay oriented in zero-G? We're asking questions like, how is it to be done? What is this process going to be like? Maybe I need an audio beacon down on the floor. And we could talk more about specifically what kinds of demonstration tasks, what kinds of things we might want to do during the flight that will answer some of these ongoing questions. And also we're going to discover new questions certainly as we go on. So we have lots of ideas. We have buckets of ideas. We have all the ideas you can imagine and all the questions, and we do need more ideas and we do need more questions. But what we need most is our disabled crew to make this first flight a success. So my people, what we need you to do is hit us up with your outrageous amounts of energy and enthusiasm and joyful adventurousness, and come be part of our plan so we can figure out exactly how it is that we're going to get this thing done. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sherry. That was fantastic. Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn things over to some of our team members from zero-G to tell you a little bit more about what actually happens in the zero-G plane and what that microgravity experience looks like and feels like. So we'll be hearing from Michelle Peters, who is the Director of Research and Education at zero-G, as well as the Supervisor of In-Flight, and Tim Bailey, who is the Executive Director of Yuri's Night and a Flight Director at zero-G. Welcome, Tim and Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, my name is Tim Bailey. I use the pronouns he, him. I am a white male in a black shirt, sitting in front of a messy background. I'm going to share my screen now so that you can see the presentation that I've got. As soon as I am allowed to do that. All right, can everybody see the presentation that I'm doing?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. PowerPoint is somewhat fraught with problems being presented, so I appreciate that. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about our flight operations plan for mission AstroAccess. This is probably the piece that people have the most questions about, and it's the signature part of what we're doing with AstroAccess in this phase of the organization. I also serve as executive director for Yuri's Night, and that is the fiscal agent for the project. So we're very proud to be able to help you all get on a zero-G flight and to be here presenting with you. So first, we're going to talk about the flight operations portion. The flight that you're going to take is with Zero Gravity Corporation. The plan is to do that on October 17th out of Long Beach. What we're going to be doing.
To interrupt, I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to let you know it's not in presentation mode, so we might not be quite with you. But if you put it in presentation mode, I think we'll be able to see the full screen.
How's that?
It didn't change for my view, but that's okay. I'm just seeing the PowerPoint not in like presentation mode. But if you click on the, oh, there we go, perfect. We're good now.
All right.
Thanks so much.
It paused me for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but that's fine. All right, as long as you can see and I can see, I think we're good to go. All right, so we're going to talk about the flight operations. Let's go to the next slide. So what are we doing? The main feature of AstroAccess at the moment is doing a parabolic flight. We're going to talk a little bit about what a parabolic flight actually is, how that's operated by the Zero Gravity Corporation, go through a standard flight day that we're going to be doing with Zero G, and then talk a little bit about the activities that are going to go on inside the aircraft. I'll be giving the most of the presentation. Michelle Peters, who is my supervisor of in-flight for Zero G, will be chiming in if we need some expanded clarification or if there are questions that I can't answer. So a standard flight day itinerary for someone that comes and flies with Zero G is pretty much what you expect from any type of experience. Zero Gravity Corporation is a public commercial company that offers these flight experiences to a range of people. So if you just wanted to take one of these flights, you could go and buy a ticket today and go and fly with Zero G. They've been in operation for over 18 years, flying thousands of people on these flights. A parabolic flight is the same type of training that was used by NASA and by the Russians, by the Europeans, by everyone to prepare for space flight and to do research ahead of sending things up. For our flight day itinerary, we're going to prepare you ahead of time, and we'll have some activities on the ground that Mission AstroAccess will do just to get us all coordinated as a team and to prepare. But it's also important on flight day to make sure that you're well rested, that you've got your body in good condition, that you haven't done anything unusual as far as food or activities the day before, and that you're ready for a flight day. We'll arrive at the airport as a group. This will not be at the standard airport terminal. This will be at the private charter side of the airport. We'll at what's called an FBO, a fixed base operator. We'll be doing our pre-flight training with Zero G there for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and that will likely include a light breakfast of approved foods to have before you go and fly. We'll also do some training. There's a video to watch ahead of time that we'll make sure is accessible so that everyone can get the pre-flight information. And then we'll also have some time there where we'll do additional training on site. Just things like how to move inside the cabin, how to pay attention to video cameras and photographers to make sure that you get good, clean, happy pictures while you're on board the aircraft. And then we'll move into the standard part of flight screening. Everyone will still be screened by the TSA. So if there are specific procedures that you require for being screened by the TSA, we'll need to know those ahead of time so that we can set that up. We'll do our TSA screening. Everyone will be in their flight suits at that time. We will not have any carry-on baggage to bring with us. Anything that needed to be preloaded, we will have already done that. Nobody takes anything that doesn't fit into a flight suit pocket. So then we'll board the aircraft. Typically that's done through the aft stairs that I'll show you in just a moment. And then we'll take off and land just like a normal aircraft does. So for anyone that's flown on a commercial airliner, most of these things will be very, very familiar to you. We have standard seats, standard seat belts, and standard emergency equipment that we use on board the aircraft. The difference is that we only have about 35 seats in the back of the aircraft for passengers. And then the other 60 feet in the front is going to be the padded floating area. Once we have boarded the aircraft, done the safety demo, and taken off and get to a cruising altitude, normally the captain would turn off the fasten seatbelt sign in a regular airplane and you could get up and go to the bathroom. First, we do not have a bathroom on this aircraft, so we encourage everyone to go to the bathroom beforehand. And second, when we turn off the fasten seatbelt signs, we all get out of our seats, take our shoes off, and move up to the front of the aircraft to the padded floating area. After that, we'll execute a series of parabolas, starting with low gravity parabolas on Mars and the Moon, and then we'll move into our zero gravity parabolas. After we complete our sets of parabolas, we'll do them a few at a time with some breaks in between. We'll then move back to the seats, get everyone's shoes back on, and then again, it's going to be a standard landing procedures for an aircraft. So I'll show some images of what the day looks like, and we can explain further as we go along. Parabolas. This is the thing that people have the most questions about, is how the plane actually achieves these low gravity states. And it's by flying in a pattern called a parabola. Basically, it's a motion that you may have seen on a roller coaster. It's going up and coming back down. But the pilots fly it at a very precise angle and a precise speed, so that as we're going up, they pull the throttles back after we've accelerated, and everything moves in a free fall motion over the top of the parabola. They nose down the aircraft, and everything continues falling until we reach a velocity where they need to pull out, at which time they'll pull the nose back up. Everyone will safely drift back down to the bottom. We'll be giving verbal commands and some visual commands as well to make sure that everyone knows that that's about to happen. And then at the bottom of the parabola, we'll start to bleed off some of that energy, and that will feel like a very high G scenario. And when we say high G, we mean less than 2 Gs. So it is much like being at the bottom of a roller coaster where you feel that compression on you, and we'll have people laying on the ground for that portion. Then we'll go into our next parabola and we'll start that over again. The lunar and Martian and zero parabolas all have the same basic shape to them. It's just how the pilots fly it and how flat they make that curve as to how much zero gravity that we get out of it. The maneuver takes approximately a minute to a minute and a half to do, from starting off with the high Gs through about 25 to 30 seconds of low gravity, and then pulling back out on the other side. This is our gorgeous aircraft. It's named G-Force One. Is a Boeing 727-200 aircraft, cargo mod. For those of you who can't see it, it only has a few windows on there anyways. Most of those were taken out during the cargo modifications. So you won't be able to see outside the aircraft to see the maneuver that the plane is doing. Inside the aircraft, you'll just feel those effects of being in free fall and being in the higher gravity. You'll also notice that it has a staircase that comes out of the tail of the aircraft, unlike other jets you may have been on that where you go down a ramp or a jetway at a traditional terminal. For mobility impaired participants, we are looking into and we'll determine, based on who's actually coming with us, what the best methods of ingress and egress for the aircraft are for them. So this is what it looks like typically to have people get on board the aircraft. We have the tail of the aircraft with the stairs down underneath it, and we have a line of participants that are coming on board the aircraft, showing their boarding passes prior to getting on the aircraft, just the same as they would do when they were at a traditional terminal. This is a photograph of the inside of the aircraft. So this is looking forward into the padded portion of the aircraft. It's mostly white with padding on the walls and ceiling. We have lighting that goes down, and we also have a handhold up there for everyone to use. There's not much delineation from different sections of the aircraft. We do have some visual indicators on the floor as to where different teams would be during a traditional flight. But for us, we can create whatever types of visual or tactile dividers that we would like to make sure that people know where they're going to be during the flight. I'm going to go back just a second to show you the seats. So these are what the seats look like on board the aircraft. They are, like I said, traditional seats that you would find on board a regular aircraft. The difference being that we do not have any overhead bins. So our oxygen boxes are actually down below the seat instead. We'll explain all of that to you and make sure that you have all the training you need on where the safety equipment is in the aircraft when it's time. This is what it looks like to float. This is Buzz Aldrin from Apollo 11 on one of the flights that he took with us, demonstrating what it looks like to float in the cabin with zero G. But most of the time we have a few extra people in there. That was a pretty special flight for him to be all by himself. Typically you would see something like this, where there are a lot of people all inside the aircraft together, having a lot of fun and having lots of smiles. This is more of what it would look like with all of us in the cabin. We anticipate having specific activities that we want to do while we are inside the cabin, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. Again, you can see the seats in the back of the aircraft. This is one of the visually interesting things about being in the zero G airplane. The photographer, the participant, and I are all rotated so that the floor is above our heads. But from our perspective, everything feels normal and we all feel like we're in alignment and the seats are the wrong way. But I always like to show this picture and saying, this is what we want people to get a sense of, is orientation is not going to be what you might be used to. It definitely will not be what you're used to in a regular aircraft. So what will you do while you're on the aircraft? We have some specific goals for Mission AstroAccess of demonstration and activities that we want the participants to go through. First, we're just going to work on ingress and egress and making sure that everyone can get on and off the aircraft safely. And we'll work with all of you ahead of time to make sure that we can make that happen. We've had visually impaired participants previously. We've also had Dr. Hawking fly with us. So we've had some severely physically mobility impaired people fly with us. And we know how to do those things. But we always make sure that we accommodate the people that we have on board and that we do that safely and within the FAA regulations for having people on board the aircraft. Because of how we board our aircraft typically and the way that our aircraft is configured, it will be a little bit different than a standard airliner flight, but we'll make sure that that's taken care of. Our in-flight tasks are going to include moving from the seating area in the back up to that padded area during a straight and level portion of the flight, and just getting everyone up there and situated and making sure we can do that safely and effectively. Then we'll do some demonstrations of transitioning between two areas in the floating zone and making sure that everyone can effectively move around the cabin and get back to a specific place at the end of that floating period. We'll make sure that everyone can receive commands and comply with those commands. When we're in the parabolas, we will always give a feet down coming out at the end of the parabola. That's our signal to the passengers that we're about to come out of that bottom part of the parabola and everyone's going to come back to the floor, and not to try anything new at that point, and to orient themselves so that they can gently come back down to the floor. We'll make sure
Tim, if I could just take a moment to add real quickly, this is Michelle. In addition to the audible commands, there are also visual commands. You'll have zero-G coaches working with you, as well as the flight director and the flight attendant, who will use a flat hand lowering or pointing to the floor so that you can see we're going to be descending in a feet down coming out motion. And I just wanted to add that in there because you did also previously mention visual and auditory commands.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. I knew I was missing something there. We'll also make sure that everyone is trained ahead of the flight day on who all of the zero-G staff are going to be that's on the plane, what their roles and responsibilities are, and we'll go over those hand signals more when we're on the ground ahead of the flight to make sure that everyone is familiar with them and understands the sounds and the signals that they're supposed to be hearing. Once we can make sure that everyone can receive and comply with commands, we'll also work on maintaining orientation inside the cabin, making sure that everyone can understand where they are inside the aircraft, when it's time to do feet down coming out, which way is down, and which way do they need to be oriented so that they can gently come back down to the bottom. Those are all things that everyone has a learning curve in learning inside the aircraft. So we assume that all of our participants will have that learning curve as well, but we're going to do it safely and effectively and make sure that we can show that regardless of disability here on Earth, that everyone can safely use microgravity and can fly with us, using parabolic flight as the example. So what else are we going to do on our flight? Well, that is to be determined. Some of these things that we're trying to work out now, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like until we have the participants in place and we know exactly what their capabilities and requirements are. So we're going to all remain flexible and make sure that we stay within our rules and within our safety parameters, but also be open to new things that we might decide to do or new experiences that we might want to try. Certainly doing things like flips and playing with water and eating candy that floats through the air in zero-G are all incredible experiences that everyone can have. And so we want to make sure that we include some of those in there as well when we're sure that we can do all of those things safely and effectively inside of what we're trying to do. So if there are any other questions, we're happy to take those. Otherwise, I'll stop my screen share and we can go back here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you, Michelle, for that overview. That was really helpful. Before we get into the broader Q&A, which will be the last half hour dedicated to that, I do want to turn it over to George Whitesides to say a few words. George is the former CEO of Virgin Galactic and currently serves as their Chief Space Officer. Welcome, George.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Anna, and thanks, Tim and Michelle, for that terrific overview of what we're going to be doing. I just wanted to say a quick word. Really, we're so happy to have so many folks on the on this webinar today, and we're really looking forward to seeing your applications, because what we're excited to do is really to advance the ball in terms of opening the space, opening space to all, and many of the folks involved in our organizing committee are really inspired by that fundamental point. There's going to be a huge human future in space, and we're inspired by the idea of making sure, doing the work to make sure that that future is accessible. And you all will play a really historic role in that, I think, important and inspiring goal. This is a crazy, exciting time in space exploration, obviously, with various private spaceflight companies performing key test flights, as well as many other things happening in robotic space exploration. And so it's a tremendously exciting time, and I hope you all feel that excitement and and are excited about being a part of this important mission, which I think we hope will have significant and far-reaching positive implications for the future design of vehicles as well as accessibility. So I just wanted to state that fundamental point, which is this is really important. It's historic, and you're going to help carry out some key demonstrations that will further humanity in space. Okay, so let's see. Anna, I guess I will go back to you for Q&A. You can sort of lead us through how people can ask questions. We've already got some questions, but you're very much at the forefront of all this. So we've got Eric Ingram as well to help. So maybe Anna, back to you to lead us through this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, let's jump right in. So first, I'll start with a question from Tommy, who asks, will each volunteer have an assigned person to assist with getting to / from the seat and floating area, as well as emergency landing? Tim, would you like to field that one?
Sure. So for every person that comes on board the zero gravity aircraft, they are required to have a fully, either be able to get on and off the aircraft completely by themselves, or have a designated assistant outside of the zero-G staff that will help them get on and off the aircraft, both during normal operations and if there were any kind of an emergency. So by FAA requirements, that's why only certain people are allowed to sit in the exit rows, is they need to be able to fully operate an exit and get themselves out of it without any additional assistance. So we maintain that same continuity of FAA regulations, and we make sure that every person who has any kind of disability that might hinder them from getting out of the aircraft on their own has a designated assistant coming with them. For AstroAccess, we've talked about and we'll determine what level of assistance someone needs and who that assistant would be. So for anybody applying, you're not applying for yourself and an assistant, you're applying for yourself, and we will be providing that assistant out of our crew and out of our staff on the AstroAccess side. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. Yes, thank you so much. Wonderful. Next, I'd like to throw a question over to Eric. So Eric, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and then answer one of our questions here. This attendee asks, so just to clarify, reduced physical ability is not a disqualifier for participation in this project. Is that correct?
Yeah, and to answer it off the start, I think that might be encouraged for some aspects of this mission. So my name is Eric Ingram, by the way. Happy to be a part of this. I work in the space industry, and from several different aspects, from engineering to regulatory to the entrepreneurial side. but I also have a physical disability, and I use a wheelchair daily, and still send in astronaut applications when those become available, because why not, even though I know they're going to get denied. So I'm very much invested in seeing this project happen and help it come to fruition, and reduce the stigma of people with disabilities being able to participate in spaceflight. So it is a part of my personal mission to see this through. So as far as, physical disability, we're currently kind of in an all of the above situation right now. We're looking to test different kinds of and I'm only going to speak from the physical disabled participant side of it, not from the visibly or hearing disabled or any of those other aspects, just to clarify. But from the physically disabled aspect, trying to understand how the body operates in microgravity is really the angle I'm trying to look for. Being able to position yourself and hold a steady orientation in microgravity environment. If you have paralysis, being able to control and direct your legs is important. Being able to adequately move about the cabin in specific manners while in microgravity. Like, those are the base level things we're kind of looking at right now. So to go back to the question, is reduced physical ability part of it? Absolutely. And I encourage you to apply.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eric. And just to add on to that, this individual mentioned that they, for example, have disabilities similar to Stephen Hawking, but with more mobility. So something I do want to acknowledge with the Professor Stephen Hawking flight, he was one person with an entire team dedicated to his flight. Whereas on this flight, obviously, you'll be one person on a team. We expect to have no more than 10 crew members, probably closer to 9. And so that is something to keep in mind, where we will not be able to have quite the amount of support staff that Dr. Hawking had on his. That being said, we do strongly encourage you to apply and to submit your application, because as Eric shared, having a physical disability is definitely something that we want represented on our crew very strongly. So thank you so much for that question. I'd like to address another question here from Zara, who asks about whether or not the application requires proposing a science experiment. I'm interested in proposing, but unsure about if there's funding available for equipment and the parameters of the experiment in terms of hardware constraints. Excellent question, Zara. So the short answer is no, you are not required to propose an experiment. You will notice on the application, we do have a question there that allows folks to suggest things they're interested in doing, but we will not be able to install hardware on the aircraft. So in other words, if you are interested in doing something, it has to be something that is more mobile, something that we can do, such as, I think Sherry had a great example with having sound beacons, something small that we can be including in that regards. But we will not be able to install large hardware equipment, and you are not required to design an experiment or propose anything. We do have that question there on the application, however, because if someone has a specific idea they're really passionate about, that they feel advances our cause of promoting disability inclusion in space exploration, which is our ultimate goal, we want to hear from you. So I hope that answers that question. I see a similar question from Zuby, so I just want to touch on that. Zuby asks, what aspects of the environment are you asking us as participants to modify? I think Dr. Sherry mentioned beacons for those who are blind. Do we come up with concepts or prototypes? So yeah, similar question, where we're working on those concepts and prototypes as the organizing team. So we do not expect you as the applicant to submit a design for how to create, the perfect sound beacon. However, like I shared with the Zara's question, if you have specific ideas that you're excited about and that you'd like to propose, we encourage you to include those in the application, but it is entirely optional. So I hope that answers those questions. Next question I'll throw to Tim. Marikaya asks, how long are we up there?
Great. So the flight typically lasts around 2.5, potentially up to 3 hours, just depending on where the airspace is that we have to fly to. We could have a very close airspace and be done in, say, an hour and a half or 2 hours, but expect it to be around the 2-hour mark for the flight. And that's from getting on the aircraft taking off, going out, doing all of our parabolas, coming back to the airport, landing, and then getting off the aircraft again. Again, all of those things are going to be affected in the same way that a traditional airline flight would be affected by weather and traffic in the air and those kinds of things.
Thank you, Tim. Next question I'll give to George, and it's a couple-part question from Leonore, who asks, is this for English speakers only with disabilities? Number one. Can individuals who may have DACA status apply? And will this flight be flown? Where will this flight be flown? And does the individual pay for their transportation costs to the flight and or that flight location? George, would you like to help field some of those questions from Leonore?
Sure. A bunch of different questions there. And I actually, I'm trying to find them all here so I can answer them all in order. Well, I'll just try to remember. Let's see, in terms of travel, our goal, which we haven't fully confirmed yet, is to try to find partnership support to cover the travel costs of all key mission participants. So we're working on that. The cost of the flight is already paid for. And so now we're working with partners to secure the funding for folks to travel to the flight. What we put in the application was that people, at worst case, should be ready to cover that cost themselves. But our goal as a team is to cover that cost, figure out through partnerships and other sponsorships to cover that cost. So I think that's probably the most important one there. In terms of different languages, honestly, I don't think we've fully addressed this point. I would encourage people to apply, and if they only speak a different language, just to be clear about that, so that we can evaluate whether that's an appropriate person for the flight. But I would encourage people to apply if they are in that. And what we have stated, I think, in terms of eligibility is basically folks who are in the United States can apply. Our major consideration was that we were concerned if we were trying to cover the costs of people who are in other countries, then that would become potentially prohibitively expensive, at least for this flight. And so we're trying to focus on folks who are living in the United States. So I think those are the three questions, Anna, but correct me or whatever, tell me if I didn't answer your question.
Yeah, just to add to that, what we do have currently stated on the application for this first flight is that we're requiring folks to be proficient in English or American Sign Language. So that's the sort of basic thing we're looking for, as the application itself needs to be filled out in English or in ASL. In regards to the location for the flight, they asked that specifically. That'll be flying out of Long Beach, California. And as George touched on, you do not need to be a United States citizen to apply. However, you do need to be living in the United States for the transportation purposes. So I think that covers all of those questions. If not, feel free to drop a message and we'll be sure to get to it. Thanks for the question. So let's go next to one from Gail. Are you interested in receiving applications from those with mental health disabilities, such as anxiety, if someone doesn't have a physical disability? Great question, Gail. So yes, this application is open to everyone, regardless of whether or not it's a physical disability or something like anxiety disability or mental health disability. But what I will say is that for this initial flight, our focus is more on physical disabilities, because that's sort of the initial kind of barriers we're trying to address in terms of physical disabilities being, excluded from folks with physical disabilities being excluded from the space exploration world. So with that in mind, though, the application is open to anyone who identifies as disabled in any way is welcome to apply. But for this inaugural flight, our focus, we expect the majority of our crew members to be folks who identify with some type of physical disability. Great question from Gail. Next up, I'll ask from Dan, who says, what types of experiments or tasks will you be evaluating on the zero-G flight? Do you have any other specific examples for us? Eric, would you like to talk a little bit more about that from Dan's question?
Sure. So I kind of brushed on this earlier with we're kind of designing experiments or having you all propose experiments that are specific to the type of disability in ways that we can understand its operation in microgravity. So from the physical disability perspective, as I kind of mentioned, it's very baseline things of just different motor skills in microgravity, physically orienting yourself in certain directions and positions, being able to control movement, do basic tasks. One of the ideas is you go grab an object from over here, move that object to over there, and then use a different object to do something else over there, are kind of the entry level sort of experiments we're doing from a physical disability perspective. And if you're talking about the blind and deaf participants, I think Sherry and others might have better input for those categories.
Thank you so much. Sherry, is there anything you'd like to add on that at this time?
I think that we're pretty open to what people have in mind. I mean, we are everyone in the whole world is at the very beginning of thinking through these questions. And so if you are also interested in thinking them through, you don't have to have a proposal, but if you do, you're welcome to put it down. And please understand that it may or may not be something that you get to do. You're independently applying you and your idea. I mean, we might want to use your idea later on, talk with you about that, or we just might want you and maybe give you a different idea.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to address some questions we have regarding COVID safety precautions. So our plan is to require all crew members to be fully vaccinated. So our plan is to require full vaccinations for all crew members. That's an excellent question, as well as negative COVID tests pre-flight. So thank you for that question from a couple folks here in the chat. Another really good question from Christopher, who asks, how many days do you anticipate a participant needing to devote, i.e. how many vacation days would I have to request off from work? So this is actually pretty short in scale. So the flight itself is on a Saturday, October 17th. We anticipate folks flying out likely Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, flying Saturday, having Sunday as a backup day in case there are any weather problems, and then at latest flying back home on Monday. So I would say maximum of 3 days would need to be requested off, possibly even fewer. So that's an excellent question. Thank you, Christopher.
Just one mild correction. The 17th is actually a Sunday.
Oh,
but everything else that Anna said is correct. We are discussing as a team whether we may be able to arrange some tours for folks at Los Angeles-based space companies or space installations. NASA has a couple of installations in the area. And so we're working on that right now, and that may be a thing that increases the time frame by a day. But we're really trying to keep this focused around that weekend. So it would be, maybe a couple days before and a day after, just like Anna says. Stay tuned, but it should be a relatively compressed period of time that is, we hope, something that most people could accommodate as part of their normal lives. Back to you, Anna, sorry.
No, perfect. Thank you so much, George, for that clarification. Thank you. Next, I have a question from Tori, who says, how well do participants need to be able to communicate their experience with the staff? So first, just kind of taking a step back broadly, you'll notice in the application, communication skills are definitely important and something that we're looking for from the applicants. So folks will need to be able to be communicators and talk about not just their personal experience with the staff for the flight, but beyond that, you'll notice on the application, we call the application Mission AstroAccess Ambassadors. And we're using that term ambassador to communicate the idea that we want folks to take this experience and then go out into the world and become advocates or to grow their current advocacy efforts for disability inclusion and access in STEM. So communication skills are something definitely I encourage you to highlight in your applications. Can a NASA employee apply? I think absolutely. I can think of no reason why not. George, yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. And George here is the former chief of staff of NASA, so I feel like that's a good person to give us that answer. So yes, if you're a NASA employee, we encourage you to send in your application. Great question. Tommy asks, will we be allowed to bring our own GoPro for documentation, or will there be a dedicated person documenting everything? So the answer is we will have dedicated folks dedicated to documentation. So I don't know if folks, Tim, are people allowed to bring their own devices on board as well? Okay, great. So yes, you're allowed to bring a device, but that will not be necessary, as those will be planning on doing recording and photography as well.
And even more than that, you know, people will be pretty busy with the planned experiments, and the videos that Zero G takes, which are mounted on the side of the cabin walls, are really high quality. And so people should not feel like they need to capture it themselves. We'll have professional folks doing that on board.
Great question. Next, we have a question, what if you have epilepsy? So this is a great question, and I think a good example for our purposes, I think that there will be certain types of disabilities that may not be the best fit for this project. So we've kept it open so that people can apply, and then afterwards, there will be a medical evaluation to make sure it is safe and not a dangerous thing to do. And so we actually have a chief medical officer, Dr. Eric Veer, who is the same chief medical officer that served for Professor Stephen Hawking's zero-G flight. And so the selected applicants will work with him and your own personal doctors to ensure that the project is safe. But I think it is important to acknowledge that there may be some situations, especially, for example, folks who might have heart conditions that would be affected by it, where not all types of disabilities would necessarily be the best fit for the project. So I think that's a great question to bring up. And my main response is that there will be doctors who are responsible for making those decisions based on everyone's own personal safety. How many total applicants are planned to be accepted for this first flight? The answer is no more than 10, most likely 9. So it'll be a crew of around that quantity. So great question. Thank you so much for this amazing opportunity, says Zuby. When are you opening applications for actual space travel? I'm eager to apply. Great question, Zuby. We don't know yet. The answer is we don't know because right now we don't have funding to get all the way to space. So right now we've secured funding generously through the White Size Foundation and likely through some of our partner organizations as well for this initial flight as a parabolic flight. In order to get to space, we'll need to secure additional funds to make that happen. But that definitely is our dream, our plan, but I don't have a specific timeline for you for when we can make it possible, just because that's beyond the budget of the current project. But that's hopefully on our horizon and yours too. So that's a great question. I have one from Fiona, who asks, Eric, can you tell us more about different specific ideas exploring the role of the physical body in space from a lived experience? So Eric, you might have touched on this a little bit previously, but is there anything else you'd like to add in response to that question?
I think that might be something that we'd be interested in seeing in the applications. I think, at least from my perspective, I'm looking at it from like a very baseline perspective, and so I'm keeping my horizons open to things that might be more complex, more beneficial than what I'm even thinking of. So I would kind of throw that back out to you and say, what might you propose for that?
Great, thank you so much, Eric. Next, we have a question from Leonore, who says, for additional future flights, possibly within the 6-month window for specific targeted disabilities, will applicants be selected from this first initial pool, or will there be another call for participation? It's a great question, Leonore, and we haven't specifically decided on that. My instinct is that this will likely not be the one and only call that we do for applications and for participation. So that's a great question that we haven't decided on specifically, but likely we'll do more than just this initial call once we hopefully down the line have future flight opportunities to welcome folks into. And then lastly here, I think it's my last question on my list. It's from Douglas, who asks, will there be a wait list? Great question, Douglas. Again, we haven't decided specifically. We may decide to do a wait list depending on how many applicants we get and if we have some folks who we think are really strong backups. So that is to be determined based on the applications we receive. George, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
No, as Anna says, we have stated in our terms and conditions that we have the ability to select backups with a rough group, I mean, with an approximate number of 10 mission participants, it is not, you know, beyond it is possible that someone may have something that comes up that precludes them from flying. And so it probably makes sense to have, you know, maybe 1 or 2 backups just to make sure that we have a full flight crew. That's kind of standard in terms of space operations to have a trained backup. And so, you know, and then, you know, if we're able at some point to schedule another flight, then I guess the hope would be perhaps that those backups would then be able to fly on a future flight if they aren't able to fly on this flight. So anyway, we're still working it out, but that's probably the rough answer. Back to you, Anna. Thanks.
Great. I do see we have a hand raised from Zuby. So Zuby, if you have a question you'd like to ask out loud, I've now given you microphone access. So feel free to unmute Zuby and ask your question.
Hi, team. Thanks so much for the amazing opportunity again. I think this will be groundbreaking and really pave the way to include a lot of disabled folks, not just in space, but also in STEM. The question I have is more of generic. This is probably the first time that this has ever been done before. So I'm wondering, what is your goal in terms of milestones? How many people are you trying to reach with your marketing efforts? How would you measure success, and what are some barriers that perhaps the candidates can help you in terms of reaching folks quickly? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellent questions. Sherry, do you have any specific thoughts on that you'd like to add before I open that up?
Sure. I think success is not just everybody goes and has a good time. Success is that we establish a couple things through the design demonstration tasks so that we can say, okay, look, on flight number 1, we showed that these kind of sound beacons work for blind people. What's the next, and then figure out what the next step is. These are the kind of tasks that the wheelchair users were able to perform. This is what our deaf constituent did during the flight. So as any in the progress of scientific discovery, then we build on that and figure out what our next step is. So one measurement of success will be tangible things we can build on next time. Another will be documentable pieces of information that we can give to, for example, Zero G, if they want to, and other people who might be doing zero gravity flights or suborbital flights, if they want to ask us, well, a disabled person has applied, but how can we be sure that person can safely get back to their seat? And we want to be the person who can say, well, look, we've shown you this. We flew 10 crew members and they all made it back to their designated landing spaces. As well, you know, within the same parameters as anyone else did. And in terms of how many people we want to reach, well, as many as we possibly can. Our sort of we're planning to do a lot of documentation. So if you are selected, be prepared to be interviewed beforehand, during, and after, and have your brains pumped for information and for your subjective reactions. We're interested in collecting not just data, but your stories. How did this change you personally? What insights did you have? What suggestions do you have for the next flight? So we're basically recruiting 10 experts who will go forth and just be the ambassadors for this whole way of thinking about space, and this whole new way of making this whole new sort of area of accessibility, which really honestly no one has explored yet. So those are kind of our, from me, that's kind of some of our measurements of success. And I think we are also successful also for me be in the number of surprises that we get, the number of cool things that happen, the number of great stories. And as we know, facts move people, but stories are very powerful, and stories move people. So we're not talking about cheap inspirational stuff. We're talking about real lived experience that you will tell us, your life stories that we will document, not your whole life, right? But the stories around this experience, and how that changed. And maybe next time someone is applying for a job in a STEM field who has a disability, this is some of the data that we want people to be able to use. So yeah, I'm going to apply for this job as a physicist. And if I someday have a payload that means I should travel to the International Space Station, I can show you that as a disabled person, that road has been paved for us already. So those are some of our measures of success, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sherry. And just to add on to that, I know we're at the end here, but I would say if you're someone who wants to be a part of this, in addition to just applying to be the crew, but if you have expertise and time you'd like to volunteer to be on our team and to help promote and to reach a broader audience and to advance this cause, feel free to drop us a note. Our email is info@astroaccess.org, and you can find that on our website. And we'd love to have more folks joining our team, making the project possible. So thank you for the great question. With that, I am going to close it here. I think the last open question I have in the Q&A is from someone who says, "I'm smiling so much, my cheeks hurt." So I think that's a perfect comment to end on.
Can I just say one last thing?
Please.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
We would just love it if people can, I think you may have said it, Anna and Sherry, but we really would love people to promote this within their own networks. And so, if you need any text for that, we have text that we've drafted, so you can just email info@astroaccess.org. And if you want to include it in newspaper or newsletters or other things, we want to get the word out as much as we can over the next 3.5 weeks so that we have as broad an outreach as we can. So anyway, I just want to say that. Thank you so much. And back to you, Anna. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. No, I think that's a great point. And I encourage folks to follow us. We have AstroAccess on Twitter and on Facebook as well. So if you have networks, if you have colleagues, friends who you think would enjoy this opportunity, please help us share this new project with as many people as we can. So thank you all so much for joining, and we look forward to receiving your applications. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye.